Hello, friend, and welcome back to another episode of Artworks for Teachers. I'm your host, Susan Riley, and today I have a special guest on, and we are digging into, yet again, the topic of classroom management. And here's why. I know that not too long ago we covered it with another guest, but I could not resist having this special guest on to give his input. Michael Linsin, who you may know from SmART Classroom Management. He has a blog, a website, lots of books, lots of tools for educators who are working on classroom management. And Michael has been around, been blogging since 2009, same as me. And I think we are the OGs of blogging and kind of sharing what we know. But Michael's also been teaching since 1991, I believe, and he'll share more about that in the episode. But what makes Michael so special is his simple way of implementing classroom management. There's not a whole lot of gimmicks. There's no gimmicks. There's no extrinsic motivators. It's simple. It's very clear. It's transparent. And most importantly, it's honest. And so I think you're going to get a great deal out of today's episode because I think Michael's going to show you how you don't need all the stuff, all the bells and whistles, the prize box, any of that in order to have great classroom management. And before you think, this isn't going to work because students are different now since the pandemic, Michael and I actually get into that during this episode. And he's going to share how this works with students since the pandemic, because as I said, he's still teaching. So he's in the classroom, right in the trenches. He knows what's working. So without further ado, here's Michael Linsin. All right, welcome, Michael. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me.
Of course, of course. So for anybody who's not aware of who you are, can you give us a little bit of information about yourself and your background and your work to this point?
Yeah, so I have a website blog called SmART Classroom Management that I started in 2009. And then since then, I've been, writing an article a week for 15 years and several books, e-guides, that kind of thing, all centered on improving classroom management.
Yeah, and you have practical experience in the classroom, right?
Yeah, I've been teaching since 1991. And been pretty obsessed with class management since then, and creating a classroom first for myself that was peaceful, well behaved, the kids loved being part of, and that I also was really excited to come to every day. And so that's been my obsession for the past 33 years.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, you and I started online on the same year, and I consider that to be like grandfather years at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Like we are the OGs of the internet, I got to tell you. And so we remember what it was like before you had to film everything.
Yeah.
So yay for that. Your blog is a treasure trove of just everything that you have found. And what's interesting to me is that I found you way back in 2009. When I was scouring blogs to kind of try to build my own capacity. And you were very much like me, like, this is what works. We're treating this like a lab. Like, this is what works. Let me share that with you so that you have success with that. And you've continued that. So thank you for everything that you have shared with educators. Like I said, your book, was it your first book? Was the one Classroom Management for Art, Music, and PE Teachers?
No, I'm not sure which one that was, but the first one was Dream Class that I wrote all the way back in like 2008.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to sell it, and so I just started a blog.
You just put it up on the website, right? That's what you did back then, and it works.
Yeah.
But that particular book I had sitting on my desk. It's like torn and tattered. It was so helpful to me as a music teacher. So can you give your philosophy of classroom management, broadly speaking, to everybody who's listening?
Yeah, the most simple thing was, and this is sort of what I brought with me my first year of teaching when I didn't know a lot, but the one thing that I really, for how it came to me, I have no idea, but I really felt strongly that I wanted the students to love being there, because it makes everything easier.
Yes.
And then, so it's that, making sure kids are happy to be there, looking forward to every day, combined with strict um, rules and consequences that protect that. So when I
Yeah.
say strict, I mean non-negotiable boundaries, not strict as in strict in how you interact with your
Mhm,
students,
mhm.
but just protecting their right to learn and enjoy being part of the class, and your right to teach and to enjoy teaching. So that's it. Those two things combined, if you do nothing else but those two, you're going to do pretty well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, neither one of those things is easy. I think we automatically assume that it would be easy um, for people to buy into the idea of having students enjoy your class, right? But I happen to know a lot of educators who actually shift that paradigm and are interested in enjoying the class themselves, right? I want to enjoy being here. And sometimes put that ahead of their students' happiness for being there, not intentionally,
Mm-hmm.
but it happens, right? And so just that mindset shift of how can I build an environment where students are happy to be here? And I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you would determine that by how many fun games you're playing or how many balloons you have up in the classroom or if you make a Starbucks um, cafe, right? How do you determine what makes a happy classroom?
Yeah, and so that's really a kind of a misunderstanding that when teachers hear that, they think, "Oh my gosh, I've got to, spend all this time after school creating these fantastic games and these experiences for kids." It's really not about that at all.
Yeah.
It's about your personality and enjoying being with them.
Mhm.
That's what they cherish and enjoy more than anything, is your relationship with them and how to build
Yes.
rapport with them. And so a lot of the blog, there are 700 and something articles, all in support of that original idea of a classroom they enjoy and then protecting their right to enjoy it. And but that's the big thing, is to kind of set that aside of having to think about that you have to have these amazing lessons.
Mhm.
That's not what it's about, and it's more about your enjoying your students, embracing your personality.
This is what's changed for me a lot over the last 15 years, seeing Instagram pop up and Facebook evolve and Pinterest and TikTok, and seeing what so many other people are doing and comparing that, I call it compare schlager. You take a shot of that and it feels like you have to uh, be a part of that, right? Like you have to do that. But to your point, it's really about the relationships that you're building. And if you can focus on that, even if you're an introverted teacher who's not that, who doesn't love to be around thousands of people all the time, that can still work for you. And the other side of that you talk a lot about is the boundaries, right? The strict enforcement of what you've set up. And sometimes when I watch you online and when I read your things, sometimes it's counterintuitive to what I would anticipate, maybe, right? Because it might not be providing um, a consequence that I would normally think would be okay, but instead, does it fall back to the originating boundaries that you set up, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct. It's sort of a contract that you make with your students, not so much in that they I don't believe students should take part in your creating the rules for your classroom. You are the leader of the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
but those boundaries are set up and taught really clearly ahead of time, and the why you have those boundaries, and the why is always benefiting them. It's
Mm-hmm.
never about you. It's
Yes.
always about what is best for them. And then you explain it. There should be a lot of transparency and clarity in explaining it and modeling it so students know ahead of time. And kids want to know where the boundaries are.
Yeah.
If they don't, they push and push until they find them. And the thing of it is once they know where the boundaries are, then they can relax and enjoy being part of the class.
Yeah.
The other thing is, having boundaries doesn't mean that we are restricting fun or anything. You can create wherever you want your boundaries to be, but they must be set in absolute stone. That's part of the rapport building process is your students have to trust you. And if you don't do what you say, if you don't follow through like you say, then they're not going to trust you, and you're not going to have that influential rapport.
Yeah. And the counterintuitiveness that I was kind of referencing, you just mentioned something that I think would be counterintuitive to a lot of people, in that you set the rules as the educator. You don't invite students along to develop those rules. Why there, and that goes counter to a lot of people who are out there saying, oh, we should have contracts that students help to devise. Why do you think that teachers should be the ones who do that?
Because you're the leader of the classroom,
Mhm.
and you have to show yourself as a leader of the classroom. They have to look up to you as someone who's going to, with authority, as someone who's going to, they can trust and look up to. They
Yes.
don't know any better.
Right.
And the other thing is that it's not honest, because what teachers are doing essentially is they have in their mind what they want their rules to be, and
Mm.
they pretend as if the students are creating it for some kind of buy-in. It means nothing, it does nothing, and it's just manipulative. And that's the other thing that we are at Smart Classroom Management. We're against any classroom management strategy that tries to trick, manipulate,
Mm.
intimidate, any of that kind of thing. The caught being good, all that stuff is thrown out the window. The bribing, the rewards, all that kind of stuff. We don't deal with any of that.
So teachers have been saying in the last year or so, even more than that, maybe, that students are different since the pandemic. I'm curious, do you find this to be true? And has any of your classroom management changed since the pandemic?
I think it's true. I really do. I think kids are different. And the only no, there isn't a change.
Mm.
This is what's best for kids. This is how we're going to do it. And so it's more doubling down and being better and clear with your expectations and setting up your classroom management plan and following through and all those sorts of things. It just may I found that it's taking a little longer to get your class set exactly how you want for everyone to get on board.
Mhm.
Not a lot longer, but it does take a bit more. But yeah, I definitely think yeah, kids are different.
So when you say that kids are different, how do you think that they're showing up differently to school? And should we, not and just in classroom management, but are there any adjustments that we should maybe consider as teachers?
Well, I think misbehavior is worse for
Mhm.
sure, and so I think just it's important to be really good at classroom management. And
Mm.
I think it's always been important, but now more than ever.
Mhm.
You can't be okay at it. You can't be, I was pretty good before the pandemic.
Mhm.
That's not going to work. You have to be really, really good and really on it. And it's doable
Mhm.
for everyone, but you do need to put in some reflection and some study. And the other thing I think is really important is that you stick with one method or one approach.
Mhm.
Obviously, we think that smart classroom management is the best, easiest approach
Mhm.
for anybody, but pick one approach and stick with it. A big problem with teachers, reason why they struggle is because they pick and choose
Mhm.
and they watch, these short videos and they try this for this and this for this, and these things don't always fit together. They don't always mesh. In fact, most of the time they don't. And so students get confused because you're sending them some opposite messages.
Um, so why do you think that classroom management then has become so difficult for educators? I know I stepped out of the classroom several years ago before the pandemic, so I have no place to speak about classroom management since the pandemic. That's why I bring people like you on who are experts and who are living it. I know that when I was in the classroom, classroom management has always been right the one of the hallmarks that we continually talk about, and especially administrators harp on when we come into the classrooms. But
Hmm.
I think since the pandemic, I have heard teachers who are leaving because of classroom management, because they, or at least this is what they're saying. So, why do you think it has become so difficult?
I'm not sure whether it's the kind of the social media things, the phone addictions
Mhm.
that have increased, or the time that they missed. That maybe that it stunted their growth a bit. The time when they were at home and not at school during the pandemic. Um, I'm not sure if it's those things, but kids are definitely different. And I think the other thing that really hurt teachers and kids is that as soon as they came back, the standards were lowered,
Yes.
and they've stayed lowered. And
Yes.
so we've allowed the dress codes have kind of gone by the wayside, and the students have chance after chance after chance to get their work turned in. And so we've sent these messages that there's no urgency and it's okay and this kind of thing. And the kid, what it does is it takes the purpose away, and kids need purpose. We all need
Mm.
purpose to feel happiness and to feel vibrant and have goals and those kinds of things. And when we take them away, you're going to have those kind of behaviors because you know kids are looking for something to replace that.
Mhm.
And so we need to constantly remind students of their purpose, constantly raise the standards, raise the bar instead of
Yes.
lowering it.
Yes.
And the other thing is when students are misbehaving, teachers think, you know what, I'm asking too much, I've got to back off. But the opposite is true. You
Mm.
ask more of them, you raise it even higher.
Mm.
You focus on the details, and kids love these things deep down, and they're changed by it. And so that's what we have to do, even more so now than ever before.
Oh, I think that's such a great point because there was a point in the pandemic where everybody was like, everybody needs some grace, right? Everybody needs a little relax because it's not normal and we can't pretend that it is normal. But I don't know that I've seen anybody who comes back to the standards where they were. And I think that's a wonderful point that we keep allowing these things to keep to and excusing them to a bit instead of raising that bar. So, what are some specific classroom management tools or strategies that you would be able to share?
Well, like I said, with there's so much material out there, but I think if someone were just starting, I would say a classroom management plan,
Hmm.
which is just a set of rules and consequences that protect learning and teaching. Um, and there has to be a compelling reason why you have those rules. So you need to be able to answer that to any parent, administrator, or student. Why do you have this rule?
Hmm.
Here's why. And it always goes back to the student. So that's number one, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, and then I don't want to open up a can of worms, but I would say get rid of the extrinsic rewards.
Hmm.
It really ruins intrinsic motivation. It makes classroom management harder. It helps you get through the day,
Hmm.
but it saps their own motivation, and it makes classroom management harder, makes behavior worse.
So, if you're going to take away the that kind of extrinsic motivator, which I'm all for, what would you replace it
Well, you replace it with the love of being in the class.
with?
That's the greatest reward you can ever possibly offer.
Mm.
And any other trinket or whatever pales in comparison to them love being in your class. I've never given rewards, even after my first year. Maybe the first few months I started to, and then I've written about like how my mind changed, but I never have, and I've never had students even mention it or complain about
Mm.
it.
Mm.
And it just it changes everything, and they don't even realize sometimes why they like your class so much, but a
Mhm.
lot of it is because you're valuing them and you're valuing learning, and the feeling you get from kids get from progressing and doing well and having their teacher who they admire tell them that they're doing well, being honest with them.
Mhm.
That means 1,000 times more than any fake reward
Mhm.
given for kids doing what's expected. So rewards, given for um, expected behavior, which is really common. In most classrooms I visit, I see that. And it's just, it lowers the bar on what's possible, what students can do. And you're kind of holding them back instead of pushing them forward and for more and expecting more from them.
Yeah. Okay. But when I think about the prize box, right? I think about who has a prize box in the real world. The dentist has a prize box because nobody wants to go to the dentist and sit in the dentist chair, right? The car dealerships have a prize box of candy and pens and whatever they can get you to do so that you sit and have to endure, getting a car. So I don't know that we want to have that model in our classroom. To your point,
Right.
right? Of rewarding you for being there because it's such a pain to be there otherwise. And so I think um, the model that you share of excluding that and instead raising the bar is so important. How do you handle it when students then do not follow the rules and are continuously not following the rules?
Well, you follow your classroom management plan just as it's written. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever your rules are that protect learning, you follow through, and you follow through just like a robot. Or I use the example of a referee. And so you walk over and you give them their warning or whatever, and then you turn on your heel and walk away. So when you have a classroom that they enjoy being part of, it makes your rules and consequences meaningful to students. It matters to them. And so the idea is there must be a difference between sitting in the experience of sitting in timeout, let's say, or time away, or whatever you call it, and the experience of being a regular contributing member of the classroom. Yeah, so the difference in being part of the class
Yes.
that you want to be part of, and they're sitting out, there has to be a wide gulf. And in the beginning of the school year, it's small. That distance between them is, you can't really see it. In a lot of classrooms that I visit, it's like this, and the teachers wonder, why doesn't my consequences work? By the way, I've got my hands together if you're listening, and you want to pull them apart, and you want to pull them apart so far apart, and that is the experience of being part of the class, contributing part of the class, and not really being part of the class by sitting out for a time. If that distance, you keep widening and widening it and widening it to the degree where everyone in the class feels like, I don't want to be over there. I don't want that. And it's doable and possible to do that. And we show you how to do that.
Yeah.
But that's my goal, like first day of school onward, is okay, I'm going to create this distance
Mm-hmm.
and keep following through, keep following through, keep following through. And we follow through we're not going to discuss behavior with that student, because
Mm-hmm.
we want them to reflect of their own volition. We're not going to tell them what to think, how they should have behaved, any of that. That all comes from when we're teaching our plan and the why, all the why. They know that.
Mm-hmm.
If we leave them alone and we keep following through and we keep creating a place they want to be part of, when they sit there, they naturally reflect on their misbehavior. And when that gulf is wide enough, then they're going to behave. It works every time, no matter where you work, what school you're at, or anything. It's the science of classroom management, so to speak. No
Yeah.
one can resist it. It's human nature.
Yeah. Of course. And when you think about what do you want most in the world, you want to be seen, heard, felt, you want to be loved, you want to have a relationship, you want to be in relationship with somebody else.
You want to be part of something larger than yourself.
Yeah, of course. So one of the things that you share on your site, which I think is super helpful, is that you have a separate elementary and high school plan.
Mhm.
Because I hear all the time from high school teachers, that's for elementary and vice versa. So can you give us an example of maybe a classroom management strategy or a tool or a process that might look different in elementary versus high school?
Yes, the biggest difference are routines.
Mm-hmm.
So in elementary school, tons and tons of routines. And so there's lots of teaching of routines, very detailed modeling of what they look like, practicing. And in this way, you're the, your school day is one full of one routine after the next that students take care of all on their own. You don't have to do any of it. You give a signal and they walk in the classroom, they check, they put their backpacks up in a certain way, they zip them in a certain way, they check their mailboxes, they sit down, they have their homework set in a certain place on their desk, and then they get out their bell work, or they get out their independent reading book, or they look up and see a sentence that they have to diagram. So they know exactly what they have to do, and so every routine is like that. And then you can focus as a teacher on great lessons, good lessons, not
Yep.
necessarily just entertaining lessons, but compelling lessons.
Yes.
High school, you have far fewer uh, routines.
Mhm.
And when you do have a routine, you can just tell them. If you have a high school class that doesn't get it, or maybe they're younger, maybe they're freshmen, sometimes you do have to model. There's also a technique that we use called modeling in place, where that's kind of more um, older students appreciate it. If you're teaching older students like they are in third grade with very specific modeling like that, they're going to roll their eyes. But you can model while standing in place, and you can have them practice modeling also. And if your students, again, aren't giving you what you want, they're not meeting those expectations, then you can ramp up the kind of detail in the modeling with your class.
That's awesome. Awesome. Um, Before we go, one of the things that I hear a lot is that administrators either are not supporting classroom management enough, or they have unrealistic expectations of classroom management from teachers, or that they themselves can't handle classroom management issues that arise. So, what would be your advice for administrators on how to implement smart classroom management in their schools or with the students?
I would say absolutely the best thing they can do is to have one approach and teach that approach as part of your professional development. I
Mhm.
think in 33 years, I've probably been to one or two professional development through the actual the school I was working at,
Mhm.
and they were awful, by the way.
Yeah.
But if everyone is on the same page, it makes everything easier. Year after year, students are used to it. And then also when you explain to teachers, this is why we're doing it, and why it's best for you and the students, and why it's going to be easy for you.
Mhm.
It's going to make your life so much better, less stressful. Less work,
Mhm.
more efficiency. We've really perfected smart classroom management at this point, and um, you know and I support any school district that implements it, any principal that implements it. I freely support it and meet teach over Zoom meetings or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, when you implement the whole thing, it makes everything easier. Teachers buying in, all that good stuff. And the other thing is the administrators themselves have to do less work,
Mhm.
because it's empowering to teachers. And teachers, I don't recommend ever sending students to the principal unless it needs to be documented, unless there's a
Mhm.
fight or dangerous behavior, that kind of
Yeah. Yeah. And so important is the idea of being able to have one plan, one thing that we're working on consistently over time. I think, at schools in general, just there's always so many initiatives going on if you can just stick to one thing. And for me, Michael, that's what I've taken away from this entire interview is this idea of simplification. And there's this phrase that I use all the time called simplify to amplify. And I feel like that fits with what your model is
thing.
for classroom management. If there was one thing that you could leave teachers with, if there's one thing you'd like them to know about classroom management, what would it be?
That it's knowledge based, that they can really do it, and that it takes some learning, it takes some study and some thoughtfulness, and sitting down on your sofa and reading it and laying it out. But once you understand what it is, it works, and it's not that difficult. It's actually will make your life easier.
Mm. Wonderful. So, where can people get their hands on your books and your materials and your programs and stay in touch with you?
The books are widely available. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all those places, independent bookstores. But I do my writing. If you're interested in getting an article every week in your inbox, smartclassroommanagement.com. I also do videos every week on Facebook, and so they can contact me. There's a contact thing. You can email me if they like. Not too much though. I get
That's
a
true.
lot. I get a lot of
That's true.
emails, but yeah,
And I
but
gotta say, your Facebook videos are super helpful. I watch every single one that comes out.
oh, okay, cool,
Um,
cool.
so definitely, if you have not checked out Michael on Facebook, definitely do so. And
Yeah,
we'll put all those links and contact information, all that in the show notes for today's episode. Michael, thank you so much for
great.
joining me today and for sharing your wisdom with our audience. I think it's so needed right now more than ever, and I'm grateful for you and what you share.
Well, thank you very much. It was great, and you're great.